Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Todd Klindt's SharePoint Netcast number 169, recorded live Monday, September 9th, 2013. I'm your host and ball boy for the U.S. Open, Todd Klindt, and all of this Netcast, the flag, the monitor, the everything, this t-shirt even, would not be possible without the fine folks at Rackspace. So if you need hosting or email or just a nice person to talk to, having a bad day, feeling a little lonely, get a hold of folks at Rackspace. Particularly if you want to find out what cool, crazy things we're doing around SharePoint, you can go to sharepoint.rackspace.com. There's like free training videos there. There's not free training videos there. We've got SharePoint 2013 tenant trial stuff there, all kinds of crazy stuff. Just go right ahead, make it your homepage. That's control something in all your favorite browsers. But SharePoint.rackspace.com, great place. And every time you click it, I get a nickel. So, So now on to the production notes. You'll notice we didn't do a netcast last week. We did one 2 weeks ago. We took last week off. It was a holiday here in the States, and I still haven't published the blog post for that one yet, but it's out on RSS, so you can go ahead and grab that one. But I'll get that blog post out in the next day or two. I've got it open on this monitor over here. I just don't have everything filled out yet. So if you get it from the blog, it'll be out soon. It's already on YouTube, and you can go to youtube.com/ToddKlindtNetcast and get 168 there. Or if you're subscribed on either of the RSS links, they're out there as well, and you can grab it. But the blog post will be up tomorrow. Okay, on to topics. Now, 2 weeks ago when we recorded 168, we had a bunch of stuff to talk about. Same this week. Got a lot of things. Been a busy couple of weeks here. But I mentioned that there was one topic that I was going to hold off on until this time to talk about. In the crowd, there was a collective sigh and a moan. Everybody was all excited, and then I didn't talk about it. But this is the topic I was going to talk about, and it's something I've talked about a couple other times in previous netcasts. But it's a good technique that I recently had to use with a customer at Rackspace on troubleshooting email, and the problem that the customer had was they had a server hosted with us. And in some cases, emails weren't getting out. And, just the nature of email, there's this server talks to this server, talks to this server, talks to, just, kind of snakes its way around the internet. So it's very difficult to figure out where the problem lies. And so the technique that I use with them, and a technique that I use all over the place when I'm troubleshooting email, is I install SMTP locally on one of my SharePoint boxes. And then I point SharePoint at that SMTP instance to send its email out. And then I set that SMTP instance to whatever I had SharePoint pointing at. So in this case, we had SharePoint pointing to an Exchange server, and these certain emails, I think they're from a workflow or something, were just disappearing, just into the vapor. And the Exchange people were pointing at SharePoint, SharePoint people were pointing at Exchange, users were pointing at the admins, and the admins were, of course, pointing at the developers. Everybody was there's like that old Microsoft organizational chart with everybody had guns at each other, that whole thing. So what I did was I installed, we already had SMTP installed, so I pointed the SharePoint farm at that SMTP instance locally, and the thing that gives me is all of the sides of the SMTP conversation. SharePoint is horrible with its blogging on SMTP stuff. And so if you just have SharePoint talking to Exchange, you don't get much meat on the SharePoint side. And then trying to get logs out of Exchange folks is like pulling teeth. They just won't do it. And a lot of times their logs are really huge because, I don't know if you guys have noticed, email is kind of a big deal. So there's just a lot of stuff in there. So what this does is it lets us isolate that whole conversation. And so what happened was I started routing all the email through that, and then what we found out was SharePoint was indeed trying to send the email. We could see it in the logs, but for whatever reason, and there's a couple of things, I haven't traced it down since this, the workflow was setting the reply to address as something that wasn't valid. And on the Exchange side, Exchange was looking at that bogus-looking reply to address and went, you're one of those spammers I've heard so much about, and it was dropping the email. So SharePoint was doing its part, and it was sending the email on to Exchange, and everything was fine. But Exchange was dropping the email, and there's no way to see that in regular SharePoint logs. So just switch that over temporarily, and then went back with that evidence, showed them that thing, and said, now all of you people that said bad things about my beloved SharePoint, apologize and look serious when you do it. But it's a great troubleshooting technique. It works for outgoing email, it works for workflows and alerts, all kinds of stuff. And this has nothing to do with the thing that we talked about, but another good troubleshooting step is alert emails. This doesn't happen as much as it used to, but I used to get calls about alert emails disappearing. And of course, there's the usual thing, check your junk mail and all that kind of stuff. But it's important to understand that alert emails are sent, we'll say 3 different ways, but really 2 different ways. So whenever somebody doesn't get an alert email, then the first question I ask is, does any email work from SharePoint? And the easiest way to test that is to create a new alert. Now you may be saying to yourself, dummy, if it's an email problem with alerts, why are you creating another alert? Well, when you create an alert, when you get that email that says we've created an alert, that is generated on the fly immediately through SharePoint. You'll notice you don't have to wait for that. But your subscription alerts, the immediate ones or the daily ones, are done through timer jobs, and they're sent a different way. So it's completely possible that email could be working fine, and you verify that by subscribing to anything, setting up alert to anything. If you get that email, then systemically SharePoint email is fine. The SMTP server is correct, all that kind of stuff. If you don't get the periodic alerts, then you're looking at things like a timer job that's not firing or something like that. So you want to bounce timer job services and things like that. But understanding how all that works out kind of helps you with troubleshooting. And again, when I got this ticket, it was email doesn't work. Well, email did work. It was this one specific email from this one specific workflow, this one specific site collection. But installing SMTP has come with every version of Windows since NT with the IIS pack or whatever. So it's easy to think, set it up, test it out before you need it. Set it up. And my favorite way for testing email these days, back 100 years ago, when emails were actually carved out of stone and sent across, the way that we had to test email is with Telnet. So we would Telnet to port 25 on the mail server, and we would fake like we were another mail server. We'd have to type these cryptic commands, hello, and I always felt nervous. I was like, oh, this computer, it's going to know I'm not another computer. Oh my goodness, the jig will be up. But we'd have to Telnet to port 25. Yep, Naomi's got it in the chat room there. Hello with 1 L, or if you had the advanced stuff, it was EHLO. And you had to, all this, it was just horrible. You could never remember it. But then PowerShell came along. So if you wanted to set this up ahead of time, long before anything's crashed or burned, on one of your SharePoint servers, set up the SMTP stuff. It's part of the IIS-6 thing. And then use PowerShell and the send mail message commandlet to send a test mail. About a bazillion times easier than Telnet. You just send mail message to, from, subject, body, server, blah. PowerShell does all the heavy lifting, talks to the server, gives you decent feedback, but that's the easiest way to test email. And I also do that. I use that same thing for testing incoming email. Use send mail message. I also use it to spam my friends. Any of you guys, any male friends of mine that are getting those Viagra and Cialis emails, that's me. I'm sending them through PowerShell. But that's just kind of good for troubleshooting all that. Okay, so a couple of other things. A topic that I cover a lot is patching. So within the last couple of weeks, I finally broke down. This is a question that I get a lot from people. I've got the SharePoint 2010 builds and the SharePoint 2013 builds lists. And so because I've got all the patches and I try to keep that up to date, a lot of people ask me about patches. And one of the questions I get a lot after how are you so handsome is, should I install the SharePoint patch? And every time I get asked that question, I've got this internal dialogue memorized that I walk through, don't do this, test it first, wait 30 days, blah, blah, blah. I've been over it 100 times on this Netcast. And so I had one of my coworkers said, hey, a customer wants us to install this patch on their farm. Should I install it? And I started going through this thing again. I'm like, this is exactly what blogs are for. If only there was a place where I could type this up once, and then every time somebody asked me, I could just point them to that. Hey, wait a minute, I could do that. I've got a blog. So I finally wrote that blog post called, hey, should I install this SharePoint patch? And most of the blog post isn't even that question. Most of the blog post is just terminology, just making sure that when we talk about patches is kind of a big group. There are different kinds of patches. So making sure that everybody's on the same page when we're talking about the patch, and then walking through when you should install different types of patches. And that's very germane right now because, once again, as is often the case, one of the cumulative updates for SharePoint 2010 got re-released. This time it was the August 2013 CU for SharePoint 2010. Not a big deal this time. It wasn't leaving smoldering SharePoint 2010 farms in its wake like some in the past have. But there was a problem with the installer. If you had the Office client stuff installed and that was at a specific patch level, this patch would fail. And so they re-released this. So it's the original build for that post. I should have really had that up. You'd think that would have been a big deal. Was a .5000. The typical CU for SharePoint 2010 ends in .5000. And so this was 7106.5000, and it patched up to 7106.5002. If you have already installed the August 2013 CU for SharePoint 2010, you're fine. I wouldn't change a thing. You're probably okay. But if you did have that specific problem with the clients installed, then this is probably the fix for you. So another question that I get all the time, and I got it in the chat room just a minute ago from Vlad, is which patch should I use? So Vlad says in the chat room, Todd, you need a web part on your home page, current recommended patch level for SharePoint 2010 and 2013. So Vlad, this comes up a lot, and I've been very hesitant to do this for a couple of reasons. Number one, it really breaks down, even within SharePoint 2010 and SharePoint 2013, it breaks down into two questions, really. And that question is, should I install this patch on a new farm, or should I upgrade my existing farm to this patch? Those are kind of the two questions. And so the reason that I, and Mark brings up the third reason, because if I tell somebody a patch is okay and it destroys their farm, somehow that's all my fault. So the problem becomes, it gets broken down into those two families. If I'm just installing SharePoint 2010 fresh, what should I start with? Service Pack 2, whatever. But if I don't have Service Pack 2, should I install it? Yeah, probably. Those kind of go together. But the problem becomes, with a couple of exceptions, there is no clear-cut patch that I recommend. For instance, for SharePoint 2010, if you just asked me, if we were just chatting, and you said, what build should I install for SharePoint 2010? Well, I would have to walk you through all of the last year's worth of patches and say, well, this one works if you're not using InfoPath, and this one works if you're not using Managed Metadata, and this one works because they all fix something but break something else. So there's not one patch, at least a recent one, that is like, this one's spot on, you should definitely use this one. So what I'm probably going to do, and I'm in the process of rebuilding my blog on SharePoint 2013, because SharePoint is an awesome blogging platform. I think more of you should try it. But part of that will be an XML feed or a REST feed from the list of all the patches. And then I'm hoping, what I'm planning on doing is having a column that says, Todd installs this on fresh farms, and Todd patches existing farms to this level, so that in no way, shape, or form does it come off as a recommendation of any point or any type, but it does give people an idea what I'm thinking of. So that's coming, Vlad. But again, it's I'm hesitant to do it, but it'll probably. So Spence, you understand I can kick you out of this chat room, right? For those of you listening, or I guess for those of you that aren't in the chat room, Spence just called me a developer. I can right click on your name, Spence. I can click kick, and you're out. You're you're beyond your best behavior. But that's so I've got that blog post, and so if you if you're curious about whether you should install a patch, that kind of gives you my thought process. Or if somebody else asks you, hey, should I install a patch? That's the way to go, is that blog post right there. Or at least that's the explanation that I give folks. So here is one. This is something I've known about. This particular PowerShell thing is not new. I've known about it for a while, and I've hesitated using it, and I hesitate blogging it, but I finally come up with a good reason why. And this is, for those of you that have been reading my blog for a couple of years, there is just a hysterical blog post I've got out there on how I was trying to set up the mirrored instances from databases, and I accidentally renamed all of my databases to SharePoint_config because I'm a big dummy and not smart enough to use PowerShell. But the way that I did that is by using the where object commandlet. And so basically I was trying to walk through my list of databases and say, where the object name equals something, but instead of using -eq, which is the comparison operator, I used the equal sign, which is the assignment operator. So I essentially just walked through the list of all my databases and set all their names to SharePoint_config. There's about 1,000 things that I did wrong in that whole thing, but I renamed all my databases. It was hysterical. Everybody loved it. So with PowerShell 3, which is what we have with SharePoint 2013, where object still exists exactly the same way, but it has this extra thing now. And the reason I haven't talked about it much is because from a pure standpoint, I don't like it, but from a functionality standpoint, I do. So with PowerShell 1 and PowerShell 2, when you would say where object, you would use curly braces, cue the developer commands in the chat room or the comments in the chat room. You would put curly braces and you would put a code block in there, like, database, $_ name, whatever, and you would put code in there to execute, and if it executed to true, then the object would go through, and if it executed to false, it wouldn't. That's how where object works, and that makes sense because you're looping through these objects. But with PowerShell 3, they added another way to use where object that is a little more intuitive, and I'm less likely to destroy my databases. So optionally, instead of doing the code block, you can instead give it a property parameter. So you can say where object -property, and you give it the property name. So in my case, name or title or whatever. Then you give it a value, whatever you want to check against. And then you give it the comparison operator. So like -like, -eq, whatever. And then it goes through that way. So what you can't do is give it a code block to execute that destroys all your databases. So I've been using that. I've been writing a couple of scripts lately, walking through stuff, and finally decided that even though syntactically it kind of offends me, from a statement standpoint, it's kind of nice. So I might blog that just to have that out there. Not that there's not 1,000 places on the internet that have it. But if you're going to be using where object, this is a safer way to use it. You're not giving it a code block. You're not potentially going to be breaking it. So that was one thing I finally, within the last couple of weeks, started using that on a regular basis. Thought I'd pass along to you guys. Everybody in the chat room is firing up Visual Studio now and getting their Richie and Richie book out for C++. And oh yeah. All right. So now, so for those of you listening along, that's the bulk of the SharePoint stuff for tonight. Now I got a whole bunch of other fun stuff to talk about. The first one is, and for the rest of the Netcast is the same kind of stuff. I've kind of recently been a convert to Windows 8 and all that kind of stuff. And one of the things that I kind of wanted to do is maybe play with a Windows Phone 8. I've seen them, I've made fun of them, all that kind of stuff, but I'm an Android man. My dad was an Android man, his dad was an Android man before him. I come from a family of Android men. And so I've got an Android phone and I like it and it seems to be fine. But I kind of want to play with the Windows Phone stuff. And so I thought, I would like to do that, but man, I don't want to get committed. What if I don't like it? But then I was watching Windows Weekly a couple weeks ago, and Paul Thurrott mentioned that you can get a Lumia 520 from AT&T. You can get a pay-as-you-go Lumia 520 for $100 for 99 bucks, and it's unlocked, and there's no contract or anything like that. You pay 99 bucks. They ship you this Lumia 520. It's got an AT&T Go, which is their pay-as-you-go SIM in it. You pull that out, you put your regular AT&T SIM or whatever, and now you've got a Windows phone. So for me, the only potential snag will be that my Android phone has a full-size SIM, which is about as big as a paperback book, and the Lumias all use micro SIM, so I'm going to have to get out my X-Acto knife and do some chiseling. But for anybody who just wants to play with Windows Phone but not get committed, this $100 Lumia 520 is not a horrible way to start, so I'll probably end up doing something like that. And just go to the AT&T. I just when I first did it, I just Googled AT&T Go or AT&T Go Lumia or whatever, and just popped right up there. So again, if you're curious but don't want to commit, $100, not bad. Along that lines, another blog post that I posted in the 2 weeks since we. Before we go on, so Harold in the chat room is saying a new SIM is like $20. It is now. So I think when you buy this one, it comes with a SIM. But what I've found in the past, because I bought a couple of these pay-as-you-go phones, or burners, as me and my homies call them. Bought a couple of these burners, and I had burners left over and just needed new SIMs. Every time that I've done it, it's been cheaper to buy another burner with a prepaid SIM than to recharge the SIM that I've got. So with this phone, you're probably going to get a SIM, but in the future, if you need a new one, see how much like a flip phone with a burner SIM in it. It's been cheaper for me in the past. So another blog post that I posted in the last couple of weeks since we chatted last was how to install SharePoint 2010 on Windows 2012 R2. So now Windows 2012 R2 is coming out. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the first thing I wanted to do was install SharePoint on it. Well, everybody had already installed SharePoint 2013 on it. I didn't get that blog post out in time. So then I had to go for the scraps at the bottom, and I'm like, well, I wonder if you can install SharePoint 2010 on this thing. And so I tried, and this blog post is the saga of me installing SharePoint 2010 on Windows Server 2012 R2. And this is really only possible because about that same time when all this stuff was coming out, the Service Pack 2 media for SharePoint 2010 came out, which supports Windows 2012 and Windows 2012 R2. So really the only snag I had in the whole thing was the prerequisite installer doesn't understand IIS in Windows 2012 R2. So it tries to add the ASP.NET bits in, and it tries to use an old command that we were using like with SharePoint 2003. And it doesn't work, so it fails out. So you have to go in with PowerShell and add that ASP.NET thing, and then the prerequisite installer runs, the farm creates, everything works fine, had no problems. So again, we're going to talk about all this in a minute, but it's good to know that if you want to stick with SharePoint 2010 for a little while longer, you can upgrade to Windows 2012 R2. If you do are getting curious about Windows 2012 R2, the good news is that it and Windows 8.1 RTM, so not previews, not release candidates, the actual honest-to-goodness RTMs, while they're not going to be out in the world, to general population until October 17th, if you have TechNet, if you're one of the few people whose TechNet hasn't expired, or if you have an MSDN license, you can download the RTM bits for Windows 8.1 or Windows 2012 R2 right now, today. Not right now if you're in the chat room. Wait until this is all done, then do it. But they're out. We've downloaded them. This little guy here, my Surface Pro, as soon as I'm done with this Netcast, I got the Windows 8.1 bits on this drive right here, and I'm going to install it and have the RTM version. I've been using the preview since June, and it's been really good. I've really enjoyed the 8.1 experience, and so it's been a good time. I'm glad to see him out there. And also, for SharePoint folks, Windows 2012 R2 has a lot of cool things in it. I'm not recommended that you upgrade all your servers right away, but there are some neat things in there. It's good to get familiar with it earlier than later. Now, if you've got the 8.1 preview on your device, there is not the expectation that will upgrade, though I will be honest, I haven't actually tried. On this box here, I had the 8.1 preview. This is a Pro. I had 8.1 preview on this, but I left the recovery partition at 8.0 and I rolled it back, and so I'll be installing on that. But yeah, from 8.0 it should work fine. Back everything up, of course, don't be a dummy, but I've been watching the web today. It looks like a lot of things have been working well. And one of my friends, Fabian Williams, had some driver problems. Back up your drivers too if you've got them. Brad Shannon in the chat room is asking, are there any issues with installing SharePoint 2013 on Windows 2012 R2? I think it's the same IIS thing. I think you have to do that same thing where you install the ASP.NET features into IIS through PowerShell, through a Windows feature. But I'll be honest, I haven't actually installed SharePoint. I have. It's been a while. But the good thing about that one, Brad, is that everybody blogged that one before I did. So there's a lot of blog posts out there. It should be out there. So yeah, that's good. So the Windows 8.1 stuff, I'll probably have a couple of blog posts on Windows 8.1. Paul Thurrott has a pretty good 4-page review on 8.1 now that it came out, talking about a bunch of the new things. I never used Windows 8 anywhere. I made fun of Windows 8. I kicked sand in its face and stole its lunch money. But after I got the 8.1 preview at TechNet this year, I'm going to move. So all these machines around me now are either Windows 7 or 8.1 preview. They're all going to get 8.1. So if you're one of those people that Windows 8 didn't seem like a good fit, check 8.1 out. It's better. Excuse me. And the server side is pretty good too. Now I can't remember if I mentioned this last week. I didn't. I'm surprised. But I did blog it. Oh, that's right. So Microsoft, again, has released a free ebook on Windows 2012 R2. Now, this is based on the preview version, but it's a free ebook that you can download from them. I got a blog post on it with all the links. They've got it as a PDF. They've got it as a Mobi. They've got it as an EPUB, all DRM free. Just download them. And this, when Windows 2012 came out, I started installing it because I do a lot of demos for people and I can't be running everything on Windows XP and all that. So I kind of try to keep up to date on all that. But Windows 2012 was a pretty radical change. So they did the same thing for Windows 2012. I downloaded the free ebook, threw it onto my Kindle, talk about that in a minute, and it really helped. And again, it was free. So definitely check that out if you're going to be moving forward. Now, I mentioned the Kindle. If you have a Kindle, and I don't have my Kindle here to show you, but there's a couple of ways you can get this free ebook on your Kindle. One is you can just hook your Kindle up to your computer with a USB cable, drag the file over, and it'll show up. But there's another way. Amazon has this thing called Send to Kindle, where you install it on your computer, and then you can right-click on files, and it will send them to your Kindle into the cloud. I hate that. But into the cloud storage for all your Kindle books. So the great deal with that is if you have multiple Kindles, it is available to all of them, and it's available to the cloud reader and all that kind of stuff. But then also, as you read on one, then it syncs up on the other. So it's just a great way. You don't have to worry about it. So I'm a big fan of that. There's some size limitations that doesn't work for everything, but that's pretty good. So check that out. And that was the next one. But read the book. Thanks to Microsoft, they're going to be updating it with some RTM stuff soon. But that's pretty good. So yeah, Mark in the chat room brings up another point. There's a pretty good program to manage ebooks called Calibre. Calibre it's not just for Kindles, it's for anything. And Calibre has a very active community around it, and you can put plugins in, and those plugins can do all kinds of amazing and good things. So if you ever want to manage getting things in or out of your Kindle, Calibre is a good tool for that. So on the heels of all of the new Windows announcements, Microsoft has finally started leaking some information about the second version of the Surface. So we've got, for right now, we've got the Surface Pro, which is this, and the Surface RT, which is running that back there, so I can't show it to you, but it's right here, working like a champ. All that hardware is going to get revised, going to get an upgrade here. They're going to have a big coming out party September 23rd, and then the hardware, the idea will be that the hardware will be released in October about the same time as 8.1 comes out. So a couple of things of note. There's going to be the Surface 2 and the Surface 2 Pro. So once again, they've done a great job confusing the hell out of everybody on what device does what. The Surface 2 is the RT-based system, and the Surface Pro 2 is the Intel, Surface Pro thing that runs desktop apps and all that kind of stuff. The big news is that the Surface Pro 2 will have the Haswell chipset in it. So the big thing with that is better battery life, and so that will be good. The regular Pro, it's small. It's got a small battery, 4 hours ish. So the Haswell version of that's going to be a lot better. The other cool thing that they announced, and they've got, I linked an article on WinSuperSite. It's got a bunch of information. But the other thing that leaked out is there's going to be a third type of keyboard cover. So for our Surfaces now, we've got the touch keyboard, or touch cover, which is ever so slightly better than pricking your finger and writing in blood, but just a little bit. We've got the type cover, which actually is a keyboard, which is not too bad. There's going to be a third version, and that's going to be the battery keyboard. So it's going to be a type keyboard, which is the good keyboard, but it's going to have a battery in it, and that will increase your battery life. That will work with both new devices, so that will work with the Surface 2, the Surface 2 Pro, and also will work with the Surface Pro. The first version will not work with the Surface RTs, I believe. So that's some really good stuff. The hardware looks good. And it looks like the devices themselves, from a physical standpoint, are going to be almost identical to the ones now, which is kind of boring, but kind of cool in that all of your existing things will work. So if you've got touch and type keyboards, you'll be able to swap them around. It will have the kickstand. Everybody loves the kickstand, but the kickstand's going to have 2 positions on it now. And that's something that always cracked me up. So we've got this kickstand on the Surface devices, and it pops out to one angle. And everybody's like, it's got one angle. This thing is terrible. Who would use this? It's got one angle. What if it's the wrong angle? It's only got one angle. And that always cracked me up, because that's one more angle than every other tablet has. That's one more angle than the iPad has. That's one more angle than every Android tablet I've ever had has. But yet somehow, the fact that it does one more is actually a bad thing. I never did understand that. But now the new ones will have 2 angles, so that will be probably even worse for the people who want to complain about it. But it's going to have that. So I can't wait for all that. Can't wait to see the new hardware here in a couple of weeks, and then hopefully get my hands on some in October. So there will probably be some blog posts about that. Got these Surface devices in June at TechEd. Again, much like Windows 8, I made fun of the Surface, thought it was dumb, and then got one and got kind of quiet about the Surface being dumb. But it's not too bad. So one other thing that I wanted to talk about for the Kindles was that Amazon announced last week that so there's a bunch of lawsuits in the background, agency model, this and that, but Amazon announced last week that if you bought paper versions of qualifying books that also have a Kindle version, that they will be allowing you to download the Kindle version either free or at a greatly reduced cost. And I think it was like free $1, $2, or $3. Yep, so it's called Matchbook, which is clever, because Matchbook and the Matchbook, those guys, that Jeff Bezos, that is one clever SOB, Matchbook. So as soon as I saw that, I thought, well, that's dumb, because I haven't bought a physical book from Amazon in years. But then I thought, oh my God, but I write physical books that are on Amazon. So quick like a bunny, I emailed my publisher and said, hey, will my books be on Matchbook? Because less than a week before that announcement, somebody emailed me and said, hey, I bought the physical book. It'd be great if I could get the digital version too. And I said, well, I can't do it for you, but I will email my publisher and see if they can hook you up, because they've got them. So I mean, it's something that I've been wanting to do. But I emailed the publisher and asked if my books qualify. The people that I talked to didn't know. They're going to get back to me. But it was interesting. I figured they would hate that, because that's potentially lost sales, right? But I emailed 3 people because I wasn't sure who it was that would know the answer. And the one person emailed me back and said, I'll talk to whoever they'll know. And another person emailed me back and said, this is great. We've been begging Amazon to do this for a while now. Which kind of surprised me but made me happy, that the publishers get it. They get that we don't want to pay for the same content a bunch of times. So hopefully, as soon as I find out about that, I'll let you know. But then potentially you can buy the physical version of the book and they get the Kindle version for a couple extra bucks. So that would be great. The last thing that I wanted to talk about, and I had my slides out of order, was I haven't talked about it much lately, but I like to, I don't know, I do a lot of charitable giving. And I used to talk about that a lot. I used to run contests and stuff like that. I haven't done that a lot lately. I worry that it comes off kind of preachy, and I don't mean to do that, but I do like to give to charities and all that kind of stuff. And so one that's been kind of making the rounds around the SharePoint community lately is one of our own. Her name is DRC or Darcy Hess, one of the two. Anyway, Darcy is a SharePoint professional. She does SharePoint stuff, whatever. She works in branding, all that. And she has earned a spot on the Paralympic archery team for the U.S. So they're having some big championship thing, and she practices, and she kicks butt, and she did really good, and she got in. They want her to come compete. They want her to come represent the U.S., but they don't cover her expenses, and apparently that's kind of an expensive thing to do. So she set up a thing where you could sponsor her, and it's on GoFundMe.com/DHess. So that's GoFundMe.com/DHESS. And you can give however much you want. You can give $1, you can give $1,000, you can give any number in between. But if you want to help her out, it's good karma. Just giving money away is just good karma. If you want to help her out, she would greatly appreciate it. She's been very grateful. I'm friends with her on Facebook and follow her on Twitter and all that, and she's been very grateful. And I'm not entirely convinced that she set this up. I think some other people kind of have been promoting it for her. But if you want to do that kind of stuff, this seems like a pretty good thing. And again, she's one of our own. She's a SharePoint folk. And so kind of wanted to give her a shout out, hopefully help her out a little bit. She's really close to meeting her goal, so it'd be awesome if she did make that. Okay, preaching over. Now we're on the self-promotion bit. A couple of things here. So I kind of hinted at this yesterday or last week, that you should all be following the Hey Scripting Guy blog. That's blogs.technet.com/b/Hey Scripting Guy. That's Ed Wilson's blog. He does PowerShell and all that kind of stuff. Good friends with him and Teresa. They're great folks, salt of the earth. You should be following their blog because his content is amazing. I've learned so much stuff from there. But he's also going to have a couple of blog posts from me coming out. So it looks like one's going to be in October, and then I've got another one I haven't sent him yet. But go out there, follow that. Again, I think in October he's going to publish a thing of mine, so that'll be kind of cool. Also, can't say enough good things about the people that buy my SharePoint 2013 Pro Admin book. You can go to toddklindt.com/pro SP 2013 admin. Just today, I got an email from a guy who wants a signed copy, and he reminded me of a thing that I'd forgotten. I put in my blog post, hadn't thought about it in a while. If you order a copy from me, and a signed one, and I ship it to your house and all that kind of stuff, have it delivered by ferry, so it's a very big deal. You'll love it. If you bought Free Advice, my self-published book, if you bought that from Amazon or wherever, if you paid the $5 for it, if you forward me your receipt, I will take that $5 off the cost of the book. So that's just kind of my way of saying thanks to the people who buy the book, thanks to the people who bought Free Advice. But if you bought Free Advice and then you buy the book from me, send me your receipt and I'll knock $5 off. So, and finally, it seems like so far away, but we need to start thinking about it. The old SharePoint conference, SharePointConference.com. That's the big Microsoft shindig, the place to be if you do SharePoint. And that's going to be March 3rd through the 6th, 2014 at the Venetian Hotel, Resort, Casino, whatever, out in Las Vegas. So they haven't announced anything yet. I have no idea what's going to be covered or any of that kind of stuff. But end of the year starting to come down. People are figuring out travel stuff for next year. Now is as good a time as any is to put a bug in your boss's ear about the SharePointConference.com. So thanks, everybody. Appreciate the chat room. It was huge tonight, and I'm going to stick around in the chat room for a while, so you guys don't have to run off just yet. But thanks, everybody. You can download this at toddklindt.com/netcast or youtube.com/toddklindtnetcast. As always, you can find me on Twitter. Is Twitter still a thing? Do people still go to Twitter? I can't keep up with the kids these days. But if Twitter's still a thing, I'm out there at Todd Klindt. You can send me tweets and all that kind of stuff. And hopefully I'll get back to you. I'm that kind of guy. So thanks, everybody. Have a good week. I will be here next week, and we'll chat about stuff. Thanks, and have a good night.